Xenoblade Chronicles, a series filled to the brim with amazing characters, addicting combat, and incredible stories. Monolith Soft is known for making huge, expansive worlds, but not everything makes a cut. Unused content appears in many games throughout the industry due to either deadlines or a change in focus. This content can include game mechanics, concept art, or character designs. This also affects Xenoblade, with each entry having at least something left over from development. In this video, we'll be talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which has a comprehensive list of changes from pre-release to the final game that has been documented throughout the years and has a plethora of unused assets. These changes could have been because of Xenoblade 2's tight deadline in winter 2017 or any other reason. This video is going to be hefty, so get some popcorn and relax. Big shout out to those from the cutting room floor as a resource for many of these changes and assets. But before we get into this, did you know that only 12% of you guys are subscribed? Be sure to click the subscribe button and leave a comment for more content like this, as it will be very greatly appreciated. You'll be helping me out within the algorithm, and my goal of getting 10k subs by the end of 2023. Alright, that's enough introductions and shilling. Let's dive in. There's no better place to start than with designs. There are a bunch of unused designs for the main cast and some rare blades, thanks to some special art after completing Torna, and more importantly, the Unused Records art book that was released a few months later after Torna's release. Well, let's begin with the protagonist of our adventure, Rex. Rex's original design was similar to the design we have today, but had some stark differences. First, Rex was supposed to have blonde hair compared to the final game's brunette color. This was probably changed to differentiate him from Shulk, the protagonist of Xenoblade 1. His salvage suit was a little different as well, with a purple color scheme compared to the final game's blue, and had some straps in the back, which was probably the piece of clothing that would interact with the world around him, as Saito stated in interviews prior to the game's release. The biggest change is the Aegis core on Rex's chest, which is pink compared to the final game's emerald color. The reasons for these changes in Rex's design is unknown. Next up, we have Pyro, who had a slew of changes to her design. First up, we have the design that was seen after completing Torna. This design consists of Pyro's hair in twin tails and is more futuristic than the one in the final game, along with the pink core crystal seen within Rex's design. The core crystal is shaped differently, as it had a more angular shape compared to the Zohar shape in the final game. The color scheme is different as well, with reds, whites, and pinks making up the design compared to the final design's red, black, green, and gold color scheme. The one downside of the design is that it was more revealing than the one we got. I can't imagine the outrage this design would have gotten, judging on the final design's reception, which is much tamer in comparison. The second beta design is more in line with the one in the retail release, emphasizing reds and blacks on the design with an exposed midriff, while retaining the pink core crystal from the previous design. Some variants of this design include a different color scheme, or changing Pyro's booty shorts in exchange for a skirt. Of course, this would all lead to the design we have today. Mithra's design has been the same overall, with some changes here and there. The first design change is Mithra without her cape flaps, and the Aegis sparks are there instead. I don't know what they are, but I'm just going to call them Aegis sparks. The next design change is the same design, but Mithra's boob window is now closed, and now she has the booty shorts that Pyro has in her final design. The next few designs, though, they get interesting. These designs show Mithra with wings, coming in realistic and sci-fi varieties. One design seems to have some text inscribed on her chest. Sounds familiar to another form we might know. Of course, these traits of these designs were later applied to Numa, the true form of the Aegis, with her name written in Greek and the proverbs 418 written in Latin on her chest, and the futuristic depiction of wings with them also acting like drones. Hey gamers, editing Pyro here. I just noticed I completely glossed over Numa's beta design in the script, so here we go. Let's start off with the design that is in the special artwork event theater. This design is similar to the final design, with the major difference being how revealing it is, with Numa basically wearing a two-piece, along with the drones being more angled like wings. The next two designs are in the Unused Records art book, with the first design being a variation of the final design, with a boob and butt window. The next design seems to be more mecha inspired, with a longer tiara and what seems to be a long cloak in replacement of the drones. Well, that's all for Numa.
back to the video.
Even Baby Gramps had some design changes, with some providing some nightmare fuel for those unable to sleep tonight. Now, onto the lovable Gormati cat girl, Nia. Nia has some changes with her driver and blade forms, so let's start off with the driver form. The first design is very similar to what Nia looks like in the final game, just without her hood her final design has, along with having some straps on her sides, similar to Rex's concept design. Another design shows Nia in a similar outfit to the last design, now the straps are gone. The major difference between these two designs is Nia now has a scraggly hairstyle, drastically different from the bob cut that she has in the final game, along with an added scarf. On the contrary, Nia's blade form didn't have that many changes to his design. One of the changes was adding a black bodysuit to cover Nia's chest and legs, while one kept her chest covered while providing a midriff and giving her booty shorts similar to Pyro. But this next design is quite the departure from the other two. It has a Japanese battle maiden-like look. It's kind of cool. It's very sick. I kind of wish it was a costume for challenge mode during Xenoblade 2's run. That'd be very cool. Grillmark, on the other hand, he didn't really change much. The major difference between his concept and the Grillmark we have today is his armor had a different color and it was slightly different. Tora himself didn't really change, besides his initial design not having his now trademark Tomahawk. But he has different designs for his swimsuit costume, Best Girl Fan Tora, that can be acquired in challenge mode. You might be thinking that these designs were also in the Ulrus Records art book, but no. These designs were found in the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition Collected Works art book. Why were these designs here in the first place when Tora never appeared? Who fucking knows? But these designs include Tora wearing a one piece with a floaty, and the infamous V-string swimsuit. The lore of this image is quite expansive, but don't worry, there are no speech bubbles here. But now, moving on to his artificial creation, Poppy. Poppy had a lot of changes between her three forms. The common change with these three forms is that Poppy was initially supposed to have brown hair and blue eyes, compared to the purple hair and orange eyes he has in the final game. This can be seen throughout various early assets, but we'll go over that later. Starting with Poppy Alpha, she has multiple early designs, with Poppy just wearing a cloak with a flower, and another design having Poppy Alpha wearing a maid outfit. This maid outfit design might have been the inspiration for Poppy QT? It would make sense, but, that's just me. Poppy's Quantum Techno Champion Pi form, or QT Pi for short, has a lot more changes than her two forms combined. The first design is similar to the one we got in the final game, but Poppy is wearing a bikini top instead of the leotard in the final game. The second design follows the evolution of Poppy QT's design, the maid dress, and it shows Poppy Cutie Pie having twin tails in a maid-styled bikini, with another variant adding an apron to the design, giving it this kind of battle maid-like look. The third design is similar to the final design, keeping the maid-like frills from the second design in the bikini, but these next two variants add the scarf that we all know and love, with the second variant having what seems to be the Japanese character for flower. Onward to the Special Inquisitor Morade. Morade didn't have that many drastic design changes, besides having this kind of sick-ass cape. Kind of wish it was there. And Bridget also had some changes, mainly with her dress. Zeke didn't have any drastic concept changes because you can't change perfection, but Pandora sure did. Pandora's initial design had more of a witch or alchemist-like look compared to her steampunk-inspired design that is present in the final game. Well, this wraps up the designs that have changed for the main party, but we still have the rare blades and some Torna characters to go. Starting with the rare blades, we have a Gion. Gion's concept seems to show a different design, with him looking more human-like, covered in an armor suit with some blue tubes coming out of his head and the back of the suit. Percival had some sick design concepts, with him having more of a samurai/shogun look in these two designs. Cassandra had a design that is a night and day difference from the design we got in the final game, with this concept lacking many of the Egyptian and Japanese influences that Cassandra has today. The same can be said about Azami and her concept design, with Azami's concept seeming to have some Indian influences before becoming the doll literally and figuratively, we know and love today. Newt's initial concept design seems to be of a human Imperial officer, which makes me wonder how we went from this to this. Japanese artists are really interesting, aren't they? Nim's design was initially supposed to be a human before becoming an anthropomorphic fox lady. Shiba's concept was similar to her design in the final game, with a few notable differences. Shiba's twin drills turned into water at the midpoint, along with her having a bigger crown. Electra had a few design changes, with one of them giving her this hood, which kinda looks cool. Still wouldn't make me use Electra though. Finch was supposed to have pants at some point, but got dropped. I have no idea why. Florin went through a plethora of design changes, with some having a cape that I wish they had kept. I'm sorry guys, I like capes. But onward to what you guys were anticipating. Dahlia. Dahlia had a ton of design changes, with one design looking like an ice queen, one giving her a younger appearance, or one just going full rabbit mode. The final design seems to be a fusion of the human and furry bunny concepts, which is... I don't know, man. I'm just not the biggest fan of Dahlia's final design. Poppy Buster was going to have a different mech design, with two of the designs looking like something straight out of Xenogears to me. Along with some sick weapon concepts, which is a crime, as they delegated him to the pits with a shield hammer. Rosette had a plethora of concept designs, with many of the designs lacking the horns that she has in the final game, with one looking like straight out of Genshin Impact, and another turning her into a fox. Niall had a design that was a more adorned with various articles of clothing, with one huge detail being the crown that he wears. Laura didn't get that many changes, besides one design having her having a sick looking cloak. I'm sorry guys, I like cloaks and capes.
Don't worry,
Hayes had an amazing looking concept design, with her looking similar to Amalthus, which makes sense within the context of the story. Lastly, Adam had some changes to his armor and had various hairstyles. It's honestly very interesting to know all about these design changes and with what could have been. One day, I wish some of these concept designs get put into like challenge mode for a Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Definitive Edition. I think that would be very cool. But, it's time to wrap up designs. Onward to... Prior to launch, Xenoblade 2 had a special presentation at E3 via the Nintendo Treehouse. This build of Xenoblade 2 is less polished than the final game, of course. It contains a lot of interesting changes. So let's take a look at them. Starting with the UI. In the first clip with Rex and Pyro and Gormott, the time of day is spelled out, whereas in the final game is indicated by an icon. The special weather icon and the time of day icon was also in this build, so it was probably removed because redundancy.
Hello gamers, Editing Pro here again. I just completely forgot about the icon for the Cloud Seas depth. This is also not in the E3 build. Just wanted to point that out.
The blade switch and current objective buttons are also different, with the ZL and CR buttons being transparent on the inside compared to the final game where they're filled in. The next section shows the menu that was completely different from the one we eventually got. The drivers and the blades would have a red outline upon hovering over them compared to the glow in the final game. There is also a return to the game prompt on the bottom of the menu using the B button, which would make sense as this is a single menu compared to the final game's many menus. Selecting characters and changing party order works exactly how it does in the final game, but the party order screen looks cleaner than it does in the final game, along with a glimpse of Poppy Alpha's icon with the blue eyes. Within the early menu is a tab called Encyclopedia that is nowhere in the final game. Maybe it would have housed the Blade album, as it isn't present in the Blade tab of the menu? Around the 9-minute and 29 seconds mark, we get a quick glimpse of the driver menu, which has completely different icons for enhancing arts, selecting blades, affinity charts, accessories, and pouch items. Throughout this build, we see early designs of various common blades. Most of these designs have a different art style, along with a different pose. Next up, we have blade summoning. The blade summoning menu doesn't look too different visually, with one of the key differences being the lack of the blade summoning theme, and an early version of Gormott's theme playing in the background. The next difference is the common core crystal being called unsigned core crystal, which of course doesn't appear in the final game. The blade summoning also gives us a quick glimpse of an early save icon, which is a green circle instead of the unique core crystal icon. After the common blade is summoned, we get a quick glimpse of a different blade list. In this build, the blade list is in a 7x3 tile arrangement rather than the 5x3 arrangement in the final game. The blade rarity is also not present in this build when the blade stats are shown. Alright, that's enough menus. Back to the exploration and combat of the build. The demo starts off with Rex and Pyro, as I stated before, but Rex doesn't have the X-shaped core crystal on his chest. This was probably not in this build as that plot point wasn't revealed till later on in our direct. Once Rex engages in combat, many changes can be seen from this build to the final game. For starters, the UI detaining Rex's health and levels is completely different, as the bar is shorter, the level icon is angled. Next, we have the art icons, which were probably placeholder icons until they all got their own unique icons later in development. Later on in the demo, we see the early icons for break, launch, the healing art icon, and in the E3 trailer, the icon for topple. The status for the reaction effects were also overhauled from its initial orange to the purple we know today. I'm honestly very glad these icons got overhauled. They kind of felt very devoid of character. The enemy health bar is also slightly different in this build, with it having a border instead of the glow like it has in the final game.
Hello gamers, Editing Pyro here once again. I just recently found this early blowdown art icon, and I want to show this comparison between the E3 build and the final game.
And there are differences that the blade arts given by blades, like critical up, are named after the voice lines in this build. For example, accuracy up is equal in the E3 build. The same goes for driver arts, as power swipe was power slide, and Jaguar Slash was Jaguar Scratch. The auto attack damage numbers was also changed from their initial black outline to a blue outline present in the final game. Once Rex gets the special gauge to level 1, we can see that the text for the special isn't properly oriented and, more importantly, is named differently. But speaking of names, all the blade specials in this build all have different names. Flame and Blaze became Heat and Burnout, Shard and Virus became Stone and Pandemic, Toxin, Steam, and Poison became Aqua, Steam Bomb, Venom Water, Gust and Plague became Wind and Final Disaster, and Chill became Ice. I prefer some of the final names of the specials as it gives them more flavor than just something like Toxin or Gust, but something like Chill becoming Ice, it's the same thing, but what's going to change? And whatever. The next thing we see is Rex executing a Blaze special, and whoa, that looks considerably different than what we got in the final game. The Blade Special QTE is transparent with rings instead of the dark blue and light blue circles in the final game. Once the battle is concluded, we can see more differences with the experience and weapon point icons, with the EXP icon being blue instead of gold, and the weapon point icon being considerably larger than it is in the final game. When Rex picks up gold, it displays the number of the amount of gold acquired plus the word gold in caps, compared to the final game that just displays the amount of gold. Picking up any item also plays a placeholder sound effect from Xenoblade X. Also earlier on when Rex defeats the Caterpillar, it dropped a core crystal, which has a generic item icon compared to the unique icon in the final game. The level up graphic is also different, with it appearing on top of the character instead of on the character's health bar. Next up we have the collectible and container icons, with both icons looking less refined than they do in the final game.
Hello gamers, Editing Pyro here once again. I just want to give a quick correction on the containers. The containers were actually renamed to treasure troves and have a completely different icon than it does in the E3 build.
Throughout this demo, you might see a reaction effect called Stagger, and at first, you might think it's a completely different reaction effect that went unused, but it happens to proc Break onto the enemy, which can mean that Break was initially called Stagger earlier on in development. We get to see the Treehouse team fight a unique monster roleplay called Rambunctious Velcro. This guy does not appear in the final game, neither do the roleplay enemies in Jormont, as the earliest you can encounter them is in Moradane. And I think that wraps it up for all the major changes within this build. Some minor changes like the changes in the hangar of the Titan battleship, and the lack of Dougal when fighting his blade. But a lot of graphic and UI changes within a span of few months of this build and the final game. But in this instance, we actually have a reason to why these changes happened. Xenoblade 2's lead UI designer left Monolith mid-development. Yeah, which would explain the unintuitive menus we got in the final game, which could take some time to get the grasp of. But this build also made me appreciate some aspects of the final game's UI, especially in combat. Now that we're done with that, onward to... Alright, on to some cutscenes. There aren't many cutscenes that were changed from the final game, but the changes are interesting nonetheless. The first cutscene change we have is the now infamous cutscene with Rex charging at Malos. In the reveal trailer, Rex's expression was more flattered than the one we have in the final product, which is a whole lot more expressive. Next cutscene is of Mythra standing by herself in the Elysium simulation. This cutscene does not exist within the final game, and I've always wondered why it was cut. That's all the cutscenes within the reveal trailer. Now onto the E3 trailer. The first cutscene is a slow pan of Rex looking towards the World Tree, which was probably made solely for these trailers. The next cutscene we have is of Pyro and Rex falling into what is presumably the Urayan Titan, with Pyro calling for Rex and both reaching their hands out for each other. This cutscene was not present in the final game for a reason unknown, similar to the Mythra shot in the reveal trailer. But speaking of Mythra, the final cutscene change is of a cutscene that is present within the final game, that is the first cutscene of Chapter 4 of Pyro explaining the Aegis War backstory. The shot of Mythra standing on top of a rock was changed, as in the trailer, it was shot in full color, unlike the monochromatic color scheme in the final game. I forgot to mention this last scene with Nia and Tora charging toward Morag and Bridget in what looks like to be an alternate version of the water tower scene, which includes the original "Take This!" This change was changed along with the retake of Take This. A lot of cutscene changes that were probably done for the better, boosted the quality of these already amazing scenes. I still wish the Rex and Pyro falling scene was still kept in the game though. Now that the cutscenes are done, onto the real meat of the video. That's right, unused graphics and assets. And Xenoblade 2 has a ton of them. The first graphic is called accessory_0, which shows some early icons for, well, accessories. Next we have some early art icons that are very similar to the icons from Xenoblade X, with arts 10 through 15 having placeholder icons. This next image, named Alrus Guide, BG_dummy_0, was supposed to be the background texture for a mode called Alrus Guide. What is Alrus Guide, you may ask? We don't fucking know, but it must have not gone very far before getting scrapped. The next image is named BattleSkill_icon_0, shows some placeholder images for arts within combat. Next up is this image named BL_face_element_base_0, which suggests this was used for the backgrounds for blades, as these squares have a color that matches each element in the game, along with BL standing for blade. The next image is another blade related graphic named BL_Kizuna_Ring_0 that shows off a very early version of the blade affinity chart. The next graphic is also blade related, as it seems to be the full background version of BL_face_element_base_0 and is named BL_plate_element_BG_0, which was probably going to be used for full blade art backgrounds, as this image suggests. The next graphic is named CMN_Kizuna_Gauge_X, which looks like an early version of Trust. Judging from these graphics and his file name being linked to the affinity chart, it might have been a visual indicator of how much trust you have with your blade to unlock the next portion of your affinity chart. The next is an unused lock named CMN_lock_0, which is just a lock, not really that interesting. CMN_mer_symbol_0 is an early Merc group icon for Merc missions. The next two graphics show an early playtime and gold symbols, both named _CMN money_icon_0 and CMN_time_icon_0, respectively. The next graphic is named collection_type_0, which shows early icons for the various items you can collect on the collectible nodes throughout the game. The next graphic is interesting. It's a collection of hearts going from empty to full, as is named compatibility_0. You can infer that these graphics could have been used for the return of the party affinity mechanic from previous entries, but was scrapped for unknown reasons. The next graphic is named dr underscore Kizuna underscore 0, which is an early version of the driver affinity chart. Driver underscore bus underscore 0 shows art of the drivers that were in the party at some point, with an unshaded Zeke and Morag. Another interesting graphic is coming up, with dummy underscore blade underscore 0 showing an unknown female character with the word blade in the middle. Who is this mysterious woman? Was she an early version of Pyro, or a character for another Monolith project? The next graphic is dummy underscore buff underscore 0, which seems to be a placeholder icon for buffs. The next two are very similar graphics named dummy underscore create blade underscore CMN underscore 0 and dummy create blade underscore rare underscore 0, which depicts Pyra as a placeholder image for awakening a blade with different color schemes for both. The light teal colored image is the one for common blades, while the gold colored image is for rare blades. Dummy underscore debuff underscore 0 is similar to dummy underscore buff underscore 0, which was a dummy placeholder for debuffs. Dummy underscore driver underscore 0 is similar to dummy underscore blade underscore 0, but with an unknown male character and the word driver in the middle. Could this be an early design for Rex, or just a dummy image? Dummy underscore Kizuna underscore 0 is a dummy blade affinity chart and looks much closer to the one in the final game. Dummy underscore number underscore 0 is just a bunch of dummy numbers. And equip underscore icon underscore 0 is an equipment icon, which was most likely scrapped due to equipment being different from Xenoblade 1. The next image we have is face underscore 0, which contains a lot of unfinished art of various characters. We get the Poppy Alpha icon from the Treehouse build, along with Poppy QT with blue eyes, and a Poppy Cutie Pie with brown hair. It seems that the Mithra design with angel wings and text was also used as a placeholder for Numa, giving more evidence that this design influenced parts of Numa's design. FIM underscore BL underscore 003 underscore 0 is an image of Mithra from a character design sheet, which was used as a placeholder image for Numa. FIM underscore BL underscore 042 underscore 0 is an early version of the male axe common blade artwork, with FIM underscore BL underscore 043 underscore 0 being the artwork we saw in the Treehouse build. FIM underscore BL underscore 044 underscore 0 and FIM underscore BL underscore 045 underscore 0 are early artworks of the female axe common blade with and without a weapon. FIM underscore BL underscore 046 underscore 0 is a placeholder image for the Blade album with just the word empty. Yeah, very exciting, I know. FIM underscore BL underscore 047 underscore 0 is an early artwork of the Beast Common Blade, but unfortunately, we do not have any artwork of the Giant Common Blade, as he is nowhere in the files, so he is stuck in Treehouse Build Purgatory. FIM underscore BL underscore 048 underscore 0 is an artwork of Pyra in the Gormati disguise and was probably used as their character portrait during Chapter 2. FIM underscore DR underscore 010 underscore 0 is an image of Rex's official artwork, but with an unshaded Grampus on his back. Icon list underscore base underscore 0 looks like it was an early overlay on the blade list for common blades. Item cat underscore 0 is a very early graphic of the icons in the item category, with various placeholders being seen throughout. Item type underscore 0 are some old item icons, and kind underscore symbol underscore 0 is a gender indicator with male, female, and a question mark at the end. Mer underscore symbol underscore 0 is an early look at the Merc level for Merc missions. Pouch item underscore 0 is an early glimpse at early pouch icons with a typo hilariously in the final name. A few interesting changes with this graphic and the final icons, like how the dice became a chess piece for board games and the violin became a piano for instruments. Rare underscore 0 seems to be some early core crystal icons that came in various colors. Next, we have speaker underscore 0, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I have no idea what it is here, along with this dragon character. Was cutscenes gonna be like older RPGs, or could have been used for Xenoblade 1 like tutorials? I don't know. Next, we have species underscore symbol underscore 0, which shows a man and a dog icon. I'm guessing this was probably going to be human or beast icons. I hope, that is. Next up is SS_dummy_0, which is a screenshot of Noxilum from Xenoblade X, which was probably used for testing purposes. Star_gauge_0 is a graphic for a set of stars going from 1 to 5. Maybe it was a potential rarity system for blades? That's the best guess I have to why this is here. The next two graphics are very similar. First we have thumb_EV XXX_0, which is a placeholder image that uses a screen cap of the early Uraya and is used for the thumbnail for cutscene events 214 and onward. Thumb_QT XXX_0 is similar to thumb_EV XXX_0, but instead of using Rex, it uses a very early version of the world tree. Nah, that thing has seen better days. Now onward to menu assets. The first one we have is MNU001_title BG_0, which is the artwork that they showed off during the Nintendo Switch presentation. MNU_001_title logo _B_0 and MNU001_title logo B_US_0 are early versions of the logo for both the Japanese and international versions. MMU004_Spart_icon_0 depicts tiers of the Blade Specials, but also includes a 5th tier, which means at some point there was level 5 Blade Specials. We have another very early drawing of Rex, and MNU017 Walrus Guide Top_dummy_0 is a placeholder image with Tatizo on the front, with text saying "Sorry" on the construction being labeled in Japanese and English. This image was copied for MMU024_orb_dummy_0 and MNU044_timechange_dummy_0. Next, we have MNU079_thumbnail_list_dummy_0, which is just a corrupted image of Pyro from the presentation trailer. MNU094_root_menu_DIC enemy depicts a bunnet next to a book, and was apparently meant to be an enemy kill log. Could this have been the function of the encyclopedia seen in the earlier builds? And lastly, MNU901_item list_dummy_0 and MNU902_life item_dummy_0, which are very, very early menu mockups. This one isn't a graphic, but this model is named OJ2000394, which depicts a salvager cylinder, which infers that cylinders was supposed to be enemy drops instead of just buying them. It definitely would have helped me remember them from time to time. There are some very interesting graphics and icons, and it's quite interesting to what changed from when back in like 2015 when it was in early development to the final game in 2017. What was your favorite unused graphic? Put it down in the comments. Next we have...
Let's show him a thing or three.
Alrighty, we have some voice lines that went unused. So let's start with Poppy. After Chapter 4, Poppy Alpha has a voice change to sound less monotone and more human. But there are lines for a monotone version of engaging Poppy Alpha into your party.
Alpha by name, alpha by nature.
Yet, on the contrary, there is a more peppy human version of her post-battle conversation with Vandam.
Poppy is shaped like girl, but if Vandam happy, then Poppy is happy.
This would not be possible because of Vandam's fate in the chapter before it. There are some unused Blade Arc callouts, like Pyro saying
Armor Veil.
despite not being able to absorb damage, and Dromark saying
Focus!
even though he can't use critical up. Poppy also has some unused callouts, like 2 versions of Quicken Arts for Poppy Alpha for the monotone and peppy versions respectively,
Quicken Arts! Quicken Arts!
along with Poppy QT having a voice line for Quicken Arts despite not being able to use Recharge Boost.
Armor Veil!
But, leaving the best for last. Rex had a blade callout for Numa, called
Pythra!
which seems to be what the third form's name was supposed to be before being called Numa years later. In an interview with Takahashi, he states that Xenoblade 2 was originally going to have an Inception-style ending, with Rex's core crystal glowing, but it was changed to have the game end on a happier note, with either Pyro, Mithra, or even Numa coming back. But after some back and forths on which one to bring back, Takahashi decided to bring both Pyro and Mithra back. But it seems like Pyro and Mithra may have potentially lost their memories, according to some subtitles hidden in the game. This was probably like an alternate ending thing where there's like a bad ending or a true ending, where either Pyro and Mithra say hello to Rex or just state their name. One last tidbit on the ending. The lyrics for One Last You are programmed into the game and are supposed to play in the ending cutscene, but were left hidden for some reason. And with that, we have made it to the end of another video. Xenoblade 2's early assets are so interesting on what could have been, but it's still an achievement that Xenoblade 2 released within the time frame it did, and became a beloved title within the fan base. There might be some things I've missed, so leave a comment down below, tell me your thoughts on it, and of course, any of the unused content that was in this video. I also have a Discord server that we chill, have some cool stuff, cool events from time to time, and that's the best way to contact with me. But now, I'll see you guys next time.